Okay, so we're just going to get started. Welcome everybody to the Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council's final forum in our candidate series. Tonight, we are doing the forum for the Suffolk County Sheriff office. Tonight, we have one candidate, Sandy Zamora-Calixte. Did I pronounce that correct?
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you. And who's going to speak on not only her forum, her platform, but also the items and priorities that she would want to do if she was elected into that office. That office is a state office. Some people don't realize that it is state and not a city office. It is Suffolk County, so it's Boston, Chelsea, Revere, and Winthrop. Is that correct? Okay. So without, we also are not going to use a timer tonight. We think that we don't need that. We're going to allow Sandy to start and to tell us about herself and what her priorities would be. Sandy?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me discuss my candidacy for our Sheriff's Department. My name is Sandy Zamora-Calixte. I am a mom of a BPS student, wife of a union carpenter, a resident of Mattapan, daughter of Haitian immigrants. I am a public safety professional and an advocate for my community. I have been at the Sheriff's Department. I was there for 16 years. Sheriff Cabral brought me on when she came in because when she came into the department, there were a lot of issues and concerns that she had to repair. And she wanted someone that was grounded within the community that could bring back all the good work she was doing. So she hired me because I was very, very active in the community. And so then when I first came on, I was the coordinator of community outreach and youth programs. During my tenure, I was promoted to the director of communications and youth programs. And essentially in 2013 or 14, I was promoted to the chief of communications and external affairs. I did sit on the executive board at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. However, in that position, there were many recommendations or suggestions that I had made that were just not received. So I reached the point where I said to myself, I could either walk away and go someplace else, or walk away and position myself to be in the field that I'm passionate about, and that is corrections and community. So after having conversations with my family and some community members, we decided that I would resign my position as the Chief of Communications, External Affairs, and announce my candidacy for Suffolk County Sheriff. And so here we are today. Do you want me to just go on, or people want to ask me questions? I'm not sure how we want to do this.
We can start asking questions. Matthew, do you want to go first?
Sure. I will, and hello, thank you for coming. It's nice to meet you. I guess I feel like I'm not an expert on any of these things, any of these issues so much. So I asked like very plain questions, but I know that there's been kind of some back and forth, some of the differences that you're drawing between yourself and Sheriff Tompkins, kind of, they're extreme, kind of like, I like that, there have been calls for him to step down over impropriety, and not to say that you specifically have made them, but it's a very charged environment. And I guess like what I'm wondering is just, you guys have somewhat similar backgrounds, right? Like, in professionally. So I guess it just very plain, like what makes you different from him?
So we can start with the whole education piece. Sheriff Tompkins' background's in communications. I have an undergrad in psychology, master's in criminal justice, and recently obtained a graduate certificate in social justice from Harvard Extension School. And it shows and reflects on some of the proposals that I've made to Sheriff Tompkins and my commitment to the community. And the fact that we need, the sheriff has a lot of power in his or her voice. And although the mandate of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department is care, custody, and control, the sheriff should be advocating for a lot more things, such as the sheriff, you can't continue to be faced with the responsibility of second chances if you're not addressing the root causes of why we have to have that conversation, such as the average education, which has been standard during Sheriff Tompkins' tenure, is it's 5th to 7th grade. There needs to be a conversation on the lack of resources and why the level of education is so low when you cannot drop out of school at that age. So there's that. There's also needs to be some more advocacy talking about cash bail, which is also a form of racism on poor people. There are people that are nonviolent offenders that are at Nashua Street Jail because they cannot make that $300, $400, $500, $600 bail, which disrupts the entire family unit. Whether it's from food deprivation, losing your home, losing your rental property, losing your employment. And there has been no advocacy from Sheriff Tompkins on that. And I believe that's where I differ. In addition to that, the last proposal that I made to Sheriff Tompkins was the proposal of Mass and Cass. When he came with his proposal, I said to him that we should not be leading the narrative of the services on Mass and Cass. We are a state agency, and the building that I'm talking about is called Building 8. We had a contract with ICE where we housed undocumented immigrants. So what my proposal is we rent or lease that building to another state agency at like the Department of Public Health or Mental Health and let them lead with the day-to-day wraparound services. First, we do not even have enough staffing to render the care that's needed for those individuals. There was an expose about maybe a month and a half ago on Channel 7, feel free to Google it, talking about the shortage staffing. So how would we be able to obtain individuals probably at the worst point in their life and be able to give them the services that they need? In addition to that, the mental health provider that we had at the time, this I'm speaking when I was there in January, when this proposal was coming about, was not even providing us at capacity with the mental health services that we needed. So therefore, that's why I said to him in front of other people that we should not be doing that, and it was not received. Now he says that we're a state agency, we can't rent it. Listen, so is the Department of Public Health, so is the Department of Mental Health, and so is the governor, and we have to work in unison so that we can get some results where we could possibly have 100 beds. So to say that after you gave your proposal and it wasn't received, we haven't heard a peep out of you, which he has said is unacceptable. We can't continue to move in silos and expect to be successful. So that's where we differ.
Yeah, that's a lot to go off of. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Alana, since I already, where did she go? Oh,
I'm here.
There you go. Sorry.
We don't have any questions in the chat
okay.
right now.
Okay, then do you mind if I ask a question then?
Of course, please.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things to which I know is concerning for the state overall is those people, citizens who are becoming incarcerated, the level of mental health issues that many have. And I saw a percentage that I was kind of struck by, saying that 36%, the rate of mental health issues for female inmates is actually higher than for male inmates. And almost by like 10 to 12 percentage points. And what I was wondering is, what sort of, if you were elected, what sort of programming or connections with different agencies would be promoted and funded in order to address that issue? Because I think most people acknowledge that if a woman is incarcerated, oftentimes she has children, and it goes on down the line. It's not only she who is incarcerated, but often her children are incarcerated in a different way. So if you could speak to that, it'd be much appreciated.
So that's a wonderful question. And I'm actually running through this email that an agency that I've actually met with this week. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of Andrea James and the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. They have been doing phenomenal work in the community and have been working closely with Sheriff Katujian on other forms of other diversionary programs so that women are not incarcerated, because primarily some of their incarceration reasons are domestic violence or mental health issues, so that they can get the services that they need without disrupting their families. So when I met with them and I found out that there were statutes and there's actually ways that we cannot incarcerate some of these women so that they can be with their families, and they asked me would I work with them when they send me the statutes, most definitely I will. And I don't understand why Sheriff Tompkins has not, when we have the sheriff of Middlesex County that's actually doing it. They wanted to work with him with the woman coming from Framingham, so that the 200 women would not have been moved to South Bay, where it's more restrictive. They don't have a much moving space. And a lot of the items that they're allowed to have at Framingham, they're not allowed to have at South Bay. But that wasn't done. So again, this comes to me also wanting to create an advisory board, which the Sheriff's Department does not have, with someone that has been formerly incarcerated, a family member of someone that's been incarcerated, BPS, Department of Mental Health, Department of Public Health, Andrea James's organization, someone from legislation, faith-based, so that we can find out what programs are out there that we know that are working, that are diversionary programs, or that have evidence-based programming that we can put within the facility so that we can work on the root causes, so women are not, or individuals as a whole are not reoffending and coming back to the Sheriff's Department.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Are there?
Fatima, I have another
please.
question. And maybe this is a two-part if the first part's simple, but I don't know whether or not it is. How does the budget, your budget, the Sheriff's Department budget get set? Who does that?
So it's a $125 million budget, and it comes from the state. And there are line items for certain things. So when we talk about, it's interesting, we talk about the budget, and I'll just bring it back to the phone calls. I'm not sure if all of you are aware that during COVID, the Sheriff's Department was closed for almost 2 years, and the population and their families were being charged $6 for 20-minute virtual visits because they couldn't go to the facility. There was no advocacy from Sheriff Tompkins to either reconstruct that contract with Securus or request some COVID money, because quite frankly, it's due to a pandemic that this institution is closed. Now, there was some talk initially that some of the money goes into the program at the Sheriff's Department. If they're not getting charged for programs, then the money can't, then the money isn't there for the programming. But then when I brought attention to it, I was told that the Sheriff's Department gets 3 cents on a dollar. But what I must say is, regardless, there needs to be line items for education in the programs that are needed so individuals are successful, because currently it costs about $70,000 a year to incarcerate. That's just the incarceration. We're not talking about the arrest, and we're not talking going through the judicial system. So we're well over 6 figures. So if we're talking about evidence-based program that'll keep someone from coming back to the Sheriff's Department, we need to be intentional about it and make sure that it's actually working, because it technically costs us more money to not be able to provide the necessary program for individuals to keep coming back into the care, custody, control of the Sheriff's Department.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So are you proposing that those educational programs would be run out of the sheriff's office?
Both. I'm looking at the diversionary programs, and we are allowed to have people in our care, but not within our facility that we can check on. So the ones that are not with our care and the ones that have to be in our care, yes. As long as we continue to have prisons, my responsibility is to make sure, the average stay is about 11 months, is to make sure we have sound program to keep them from coming back. But the program has to address the root causes of why people are incarcerated.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
If anybody has a question, they can either place it in the chat or they can raise their hand if there are anyone.
I can just bring up a couple of things that I've brought to my attention during the my campaign trail, that questions I've had to answer until sure. People have some questions. I know I've had to answer several times, why should I care if I don't have anyone incarcerated? And I have to let people know that, excuse me, that everyone should care because they come back to the same community that we live in. I mean, I have had an individual that kept getting released that had mental health issues, and I found this out because I had a relationship with the captain at B3, and they kept releasing him with not giving him the care that he needed, and he continued to offend. and he broke into my husband's car. He was breaking into the cars on the streets. So it affects all of us if we don't work together to give people the programming that they need so that they can be successful. And we also need a sheriff that's going to be present within the community, hear the voices of the people, understand that things have to be done in unison so that we can all be successful, because the goal is for people not to come back. And that's what the win is. I see Barbara Crishel's hand up.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Barbara, how are you?
I'm good. I just want to follow up with what you were saying about the education level of those that are incarcerated, because I can't even remember how long ago it was, but I had brought this to Sheriff Cabral's attention. So you know how far back that goes.
I do.
Because my concern is if you don't, when they have prisoners in the system and you find that they can't read, they can't do math, they have a lack of serious skills, so that eventually they're going to get out, because they're not in there for life. But anyway, who educates them? And at that point, there was no program at that time to educate these the inmates, and I couldn't understand. Because I'm saying, well, let me just go a little ahead. I have a son that's a federal agent, and he's at a federal prison in North Carolina, and they have fantastic programs on the federal level for those guys that are in there. They're getting an education, they're getting all types of skills, so that when they get out, they're not going to be a burden to the community or the city. They're going to have some sort of skill so that they can get a job. And I'm just surprised that after all this length of time, we're still talking about it, that we don't have it in the system.
So we do have educational programs. Individuals are able to get their GED, I mean, the high sec, that's what it's called, within the system. The problem is that's not an easy test to take, first of all. And if you're talking about your average stay is 11 months, and you have 60 to 70% of that population has a 5th to 7th grade education, imagine how hard that exam is going to be for an individual. So we have to address the issue before they even come to us. That's not acceptable. My daughter's going to the 7th grade. And when she was not meeting some of her marks or whatever, they came to me and they talked about getting her where she needed to be and how we were going to get her there. So that's not happening because we have adults that have that education level. So we need to get them at a higher, just our community as a whole needs to look at what's happening with education in our community. I mean, people talk about, we need to have college courses. But when I'm telling you 60 to 70% as a 5th to 7th grade, I need people to understand the population we're working with. And yes, I'm pro, which, we have technical, vocational training in there, but we also have to understand that besides the labor, to be an electrician, to be a carpenter, you have to understand mathematics. You have to be able to do math. So these are some of the barriers that we're facing with some of the population that we're trying to tackle within 11 months. And that's why I'm saying we have to address the root causes.
Yeah, okay, because what I'm thinking is that why, okay, when they get in, when a person is entered into the system, do they check to find out what level of education they're on? Because my thing is that if they're going to be incarcerated all day, all night, they have nothing else to do but to get an education. And I look at it like this. And since I made that comment to the former sheriff, I'll get personal again. My grandson has autism, and he just graduated from North Carolina A&T, and he's going back for his master's.
Wonderful.
So and one of the problems that my daughter, of course she didn't listen to her mother, does he have a foreign language skill? And she said, oh, he didn't need it. But then in his senior year, she found out that he needed a foreign language. He was able to do that online. So I'm saying that, I'm saying like this, if he can do this with a disability, we have, we have people that should at least come up to a level where they can read and do math. They don't have to be scientists. They don't have to do all of that stuff, but please give them the basic skills so that when they do get out, they're not going to be a burden on the community or any of the other services that are out there, that they could step right up and get a job.
So the Sheriff's Department has a lot of programs. They have currently about 90 programs to be exact. What they don't have is a research department to know which programs actually working and which is not. And I do want to have a research department so I can see which programs are working, which is not. In terms of your stepson, I always say they have an ability, and it's an impeccable ability. As you know, my daughter's on the spectrum too. She's high functioning, and she's actually going to BLA in September. So I'm very proud of her and her progress and all that she's done. But the struggle has not been easy with BPS. I have had to hire a full mainstream external team that has cost me thousands of dollars. So I cannot imagine parents that don't have the language, the articulation, and the knowledge of the resources, what's happened to their children. So when I say that I am committed to this at all different levels, I cannot sit here and continually talk about second chances when I know our children are not getting a first chance within our school system. And that is the reality,
Okay,
especially
so,
our children on the spectrum that have IEPs.
yeah. So in other words, I just want to understand that when you will see.
I'm going to work on it. Yes, I'm going to work on it. I'm going to work on it. You will hear me talking about it.
You will see that these inmates have an opportunity to get to that level where they're able to go out and get a job, yes, and not be such a burden to the rest of the community.
That is the goal. But I believe there's power in numbers, and I need the community to work with me when I talk about the average education level, and I talk about what the population is coming with and what they're lacking, so we can work in unison, because we don't have to keep continuing this cycle. And until we address it, we're going to still continue the cycle.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat.
Sure. So there are two. So the first question is there a reason why Sheriff Tompkins isn't present? Could he not make it?
The reason the reason that Sheriff Tompkins, I did say earlier, maybe some weren't here. Sheriff Tompkins had called and said that he would not be able to come tonight because of a family engagement that he was to attend. He had called early last Saturday is when I had found that out. So it is what it is. If we're able to schedule, we will. But as candidate Sandy had gone already and made time for her, we did not want to go and take away from her scheduled time, considering the last few weeks in a candidate's schedule are often very already set and very busy. So that is that's the reason why.
I'm sorry, Fatima. I missed what you said. The reason why.
The reason I was given is that he had a family engagement. I had gone and set the calendar to his office, and I guess it is what it is. I have no other explanation for it. So that is where we're at right now.
Okay, so the second question is, can you expand upon the intake process, and does it include the potential inmates' mental health, and are there required programs to support reducing the recidivism rate? Also, is skill development a requirement?
So the classification process for everyone when they come in. And yes, we go through mental health, education level, previous employment, where they have lived. We go through asking them, we're assessing them so we can know where they're at, so what type of program. And I think the question is, they're mandatory. It's not mandatory. It's not mandatory for the males. The females, it is mandatory because it's a smaller population. But no, it is not mandatory. We can't force them to go. And sometimes you have to realize when you force someone to do something, it disrupts the other people that want to actually participate.
No, and thank you for clarifying that, Sandy. And I wasn't necessarily saying that it was mandatory, but more of, is there a screening process that is integrated into like their human experience, like what has been spoken up here tonight, that if we acknowledge that someone has a development issue, someone needs additional skills, that there is a process for them to do that, and they're screened at the very beginning versus like once they're part of the general population. So it was more of that. So thank you for clarifying. And the other question I had was around like skill development as it relates to the workforce, because to the point that's been made here, you know, those items are really important. Poverty is one of the number one reasons people are sometimes in jail. And so it's from the experience of, you know, of living in poverty. And so I didn't know if there are like workforce development programs that are afforded to them while they are there.
There are, but the problem that we need to do a better job when we're talking about workforce development and employment going out is the mandate and that care, custody, and control. So we don't know after we've given them this training what is happening afterwards. But the continuum of care, continuing for mental health, continuing for employment, and that's where I feel as though we're falling short. And what I want us to do is, we have on the other end, when we talk about arrests and stuff, we have MOUs with like the FBI, BPD, the DEA when we're talking about arrest, right? But we don't have them on the other end. So there are agencies that I want to work with. So when someone is in our facility, and then we also have them, that individual that works with another agency, once they move on, we still have access. So that agency has access. It's just, it's streamlined. It's just an easy process. They're going over. It's the same person that they're working on when they were inside the facility, so they don't get lost when they leave. I know Sheriff Tompkins talked about his program, Family Matters, and I recommend everyone to go to his 5-year report at the Suffolk SCSDMA.org, because that's where that report falls short. It's an enrollment or admissions report, as you'd want to call it, because it talks about like, I feel like 700 and some people did the 30-hour OSHA training, but we don't know how many people got jobs. We talk about they assisted 237 families in 5 years, but it doesn't talk about how we've assisted them and if they ever got any services. So those are the type of things that I want to expand on, so we can make sure, although it's beyond our mandate, if we build those relationships and have those arrangements, then we're able to make sure our individuals aren't getting lost once they leave the facility.
Well, thank you.
No.
Oh, Helena, I'm sorry. Helena has her hand raised.
Yes, I think I have two questions, and maybe they're connected. One, in your 16 years in the Sheriff's Department, what I know you mentioned tonight that you would like to have a research panel to look at different programs that you feel that you look into that might be necessary in order to support the inmates that are there. I was wondering if you could share with us any programs that you feel or you think might be helpful in that sense. And also listening to most of them enter or are at the 5th to 7th grade education level, what type of programs are offered to support that level of education? Is it within the facility or is it external? I just would love to hear a little bit about that too.
When I say research, I mean us having a research department to make sure our programs are measurable. So we can know if someone went through one of our programs, if they come back, if it worked or not. Like, why did they come back? So we can see where our programs are lacking. We have no idea. We're not measuring any of the programs at the Sheriff's Department. So that's what I mean when I say a research. We need our own research department so we can make sure all our programs are measurable and we have tracking systems. So, and in terms of getting them ready, yes, we do have classes, educational classes for them, so that we can get them prepared for their high set with GED. There are classes for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a stupid question.
No
So
question is
the sh-
stupid, I can imagine.
honestly, I'm like learning so much. So does the sheriff's department basically just run the prisons, or like do sheriffs arrest people?
So we do have powers to arrest. Now with the police reform, anyone to have the powers to arrest has to go through the 6-month training, just as an officer does. And then you become deputized and you do have the powers. The mandate of the sheriff's department is care, custody, and control, and that would be Nashville Street Jail. That would
Right.
also be House of Correction, South Bay. But we also oversee the Civil Process Division, which is for when people are getting issued evictions and stuff like that. And then we have our training facility.
Oh, right. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Written chat or?
We do have one in the chat. The question is, by research, do you also mean evaluation? And I guess it's a follow-up to an earlier question. If you want me to reread the question, I can, or if that's enough, just let me know.
In terms of the program, yes, research, evaluate them, have a team that's going through these programs on a fine-tooth comb so we can make sure that they're measurable and they're working. So yes, we'd be evaluating them.
I have a question. So I guess they're on the sheriff's site, the Suffolk County Sheriff's site, there's a quote that says that when people, there are on average, I guess, 3,000 people who are incarcerated. They go into either the House of Corrections, I guess is where they are incarcerated for whatever period. And then usually what happens, most of them end up, when they are released, they are living within a 5-mile radius of the facility. So within a 5-mile radius of South Bay, is that what?
It's within, so a little over 90% of the population is going to live actually 2.5 miles within South Bay.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, if you were elected, what would you believe that you would have a mandate to find a way to directly connect to the different departments that you've talked about, to ask for direct support in order that the recidivism goes the other way? Because we know that there right now is a housing crisis, which is exacerbating, I can imagine, many of the problems that all of the different branches of government are having right now. But in particular, the education, the public school system, and housing, along with incarceration, is there a way that you can, that new ideas about how that would be improved? And or would that require in your mind, a different stream of funding in order to directly address those issues?
So
you don't have to like come up with pieces.
no, I mean, I have an answer. So we're gonna have a new governor. I'm predicting we have Maura Healey, and we have a slew of candidates that talk about the criminal legal system, police reform, criminal justice reform, and we have to begin to hold the people accountable that are running on these messages. And that's what I plan on doing, having these conversations to talk about housing. And that's another proposal. This was before COVID, when I had proposed that we were doing these things, directions for corrections, community forums. And I wanted to have a community forum and have some of the city, state, and federal level to talk about the housing issue, because we're investing money into individuals, they're leaving and they do not have housing. And I was told no. So these are the type of things that I plan on doing, is having these conversations and having them community centered so the community can be a part of it, so we can all understand why it's so important that we allocate housing, we make sure people have jobs, that we understand that there's actually a reason why some of these people are in the care of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department due to a lack of, whether it's mental health support, whether it's education, whether it's because it's substance use disorder. The list is long, and they all need to be addressed, and there are organizations that can help address all of them that should be held accountable to do the work that needs to be done to address the crisis.
Thank you. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat. You'd rather not speak. There's another question. Okay, I will ask the big question then. ASINCAS. So, you know, there have been forum after forum after forum for a while talking about ASINCAS, and inevitably, you know, we do hear on some forums people speak about the need to have it be a regional answer and not only the city of Boston answer at the state level, but even other states, because we have people who are coming from everywhere to Boston, right? My question is, what role do you see that the Sheriff's Department being able to, at this, you know, in looking forward, say next year, what role would you say that this department could assist in alleviating, not in incarcerating, but in changing according to what your platform is? How would that look differently?
I would instantly have a conversation about building 8. That's a possibility of 100 beds as a rehabilitation center. But let me also say this: there needs to be a decentralization approach to this. A majority of the people of ASINCAS are not from the city of Boston. Boston cannot endure the responsibility for all of this. And I had said during my last debate at Hibernian Hall, I had referenced the fact that our children can't even use their local park, and that's Clifford Park. And the individual has, you know, he's had some things that he probably shouldn't have done towards the governor or whatever. And but he invited me to go to that park, and I did. And it's disheartening to see our babies and their parents, and primarily with their moms, out there with them in a park with needle caps, a woman who's sleeping, who's been encampment by the slides where the kids should be playing, and then later use their water fountain to bathe. And I saw someone else use the water fountain to bathe. That is unacceptable. It is affecting our babies. They should not be losing their space, considering the fact that we live in congested areas anyways. Many of us live in apartments, there's not that much space. But to have our children playing in that park and to see that there hasn't been a cry to fix it and clean it and make sure it's suitable for our babies to play is unacceptable to me. And I didn't know how bad it was until I went there. So what I say is, ASINCAS, I will revisit building 8, but I also be a good neighbor and understand the power that the sheriff has in their voice, and I will utilize it. I would talk about Clifford Park that our babies are using and should not be using it in that condition. And I hope if there's anyone else on this call that's aware of it or seen it, would speak on it. Because Blackstone Park is right down the street around the corner, and they're two different worlds. And it's just not fair what our kids have to, it's become a norm for them, a norm, and it's disheartening. And believe me, our babies that are playing there look exactly like us. So that's what I plan on doing, being a good neighbor, using my voice, calling people to the table, and looking at building 8 to see how we can utilize that space for some of it, but also speaking to the mayor, governor, and there needs to be a call of the local cities and towns. They should be at the table, and they need to own some of this responsibility because some of the people out there are from their cities and towns.
Thank you. Barbara?
Yeah, to follow up on that, I want to say it must have been maybe 4 or 5 years ago. The teachers and parents at the why can't I say the name of the school? The pilot school Orchard Gardens. They had gone through the two parks, the park that's right behind the school and the park that you were talking about that's right across from 1010 Mass Avenue. But there was also the rice field on Washington Street, right behind where they put that new hotel. That was another location that had, that the residents and the neighbors were picking up needles and they put them in a box and had a press conference, and they just dumped them all out on the table just to show how many that they had picked up. One, it was very dangerous because, you know, if they ever got stuck with the needles, that's one thing. But I mean, like, this goes back at least 5 years that no one was paying attention and no one did a darn thing about controlling what was going on in these parks. And again, like you said, Blackstone Park is not that far away and they don't have that problem. But we have 3 parks that are equal distance because I grew up in that area. I grew up hanging in the cathedral. I grew up in Lenox Street and I used to go down to Orchard Park. But I know those parks. I grew up down there. And there is a big difference of what goes on in those 3 parks than what goes on in Blackstone Park. But again, after those parents did that, it just seems like, yeah, okay, well, you all can disappear now. Because again, like you said, nothing was done.
I mean, we have a response. I understand we're talking about people with an addiction, but we also have a responsibility to our babies. They're our future. And we have to watch how we view them and, you know, people, you know, and what they're seeing on a daily basis. So it was just, yeah, it's not okay. And as, you know, I'm going to call it intuition. As the next sheriff, I become a neighbor to that park. And so I will be speaking on the issues and concern of Clifford Park for our children.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the chat?
No, there aren't any questions right now.
Okay. I do have a question. You had mentioned earlier the staffing underneath the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department.
Mhm.
How many people are they considered to be deputies sheriffs? Is that the term, or they're officers, or
Do you mean how
many
many correctional officers as a whole are there?
within Suffolk County, or who work within the South Bay area, since we're talking about that area?
So last I checked, and a lot of officers have resigned since I've been gone. I honestly, I'd be making up a number if I told you, because I keep hearing we're losing people in high volumes. I can tell you that the ratio, which I have an issue with, is 1 to 64, 1 officer to 64 of a population. So I don't know how much work you expect an officer to get or be able to attend to someone in our care when you have 1 to 64.
So like other departments, you know, the Boston Police Department as well, are having recruiting and retention difficulties. Is that a fair assessment?
The problem with the Sheriff's Department is there's no research. I mean, there's no recruitment department. And even if you look at the, you know, there've been no incentives there, you know, we have to build our relationships with our local colleges so that we can talk about the criminal legal system, talk about diversionary programs, and talk about the change in the direction that corrections is going in to get them to want to be part of this change. And so I also want to develop a recruitment department so that we can build, and whether it's incentives or whatever we need to do so we can increase the staffing.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Anyone? Please speak up. You all came here tonight. Javon? I'm not calling you. The names are the same. Anyone? No? Well, let's see. We have roughly 15 more minutes. I didn't know, unless anyone else has any other questions that haven't been answered already. But if you'd like to, say a few closing words, then I guess.
So I want to say thank you to everyone that tuned in tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to hear about my my candidacy for Suffolk County Sheriff. I have always been grounded. I've always been active in the community, and what I want to do is bring the Sheriff's Department, the community together. We can make a lot of change if we do it together and we get the results that we need for the betterment of the population, our community, and our children, so that we can get it before they even come to us. So I hope you'll consider my candidacy for Suffolk County Sheriff. Please feel free to visit my website, sandyforsheriff.com. I will put it in the chat. And reach out to me if anyone has any questions. I definitely have a pathway to victory, and this is how I do it. I have been present to every single forum of debate I have been asked to attend, and I will continue to do so to pass the message and let people know that I'm extremely passionate about corrections and our community, and I look forward to being able to be the next sheriff of Suffolk County. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
And feel free, if you want to volunteer, phone bank, door knock, feel free to sign up to volunteer. We can always use